Exodus chapter 15. I'm going to look at the last verse. But we've been going, we got them out of Egypt. We got them across the Red Sea. Taking care of Pharaoh. He's buried at the bottom of the sea. Now they're on the opposite side of the Red Sea. And now what? We're free, but they have no idea how to be free. And we talk for this generation and for 200 or 300 years before, all they knew was slavery. And at the end, it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So they didn't know how to live free. Right. They didn't really know how to take care of themselves, to provide for themselves, because we'll see in a verse later on here in a minute that they were used to having everything provided for them. It was their fault. So they were used to be provided for in every way. Now they're on the edge of the desert. You know, see back here, and now they've got to look forward. All they see is desert, dry land, arid land. There's nothing there. So now what are they going to do? God had a plan. He got them that far. So they're at the Red Sea, and they started moving on from there. And in verse 27, 15, chapter 15, verse 27, it says, Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees. So they encamped there by the waters, which makes a whole lot of sense, because in a dry land or desert, you want to have water. And when you get to water, you're going to get your fill up all your tanks or your water pots. You're going to load up while you're there and stay there for a while. And so God's really given a chance to rest. I mean, they've been through this traumatic thing, hundreds of years of slavery, the plagues that they weren't affected by, but they had to endure and see all of them. They had to see these things happening. So it's traumatic for people to witness them, even if they don't go through them. So they've seen all that, and they finally turned loose, and they look back behind them, here comes Pharaoh, trying to kill them all. That's traumatic and scary. They see this cloud and this pillar of fire. That could be kind of scary and traumatic and take a lot of emotion. They see the sea part. They walk across on dry land, get to the other side, and they see the sea annihilate hundreds and hundreds of thousands of men and horses. And so they're just pretty wiped out by the time emotionally. They need a chance to rest. And so they come to this oasis. And it's that word, oasis, conjures up feelings and thoughts in your mind of a place of rest and refreshing in water in a dry land. And that's exactly what this was. So they come to this place, and they came to this place called Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees. So why were the wells counted and why were the trees counted? Why do we know how many there were? Now, I used to be skeptical and even worse of people making a big deal out of numbers in the Bible. Well, 12 of this, 20 of that, 40 of that, 3 of that, 7 of that, 10 of that. And say, oh, well, that's just coincidence, or it doesn't mean anything. And a lot of times it may not, but I believe that there is something to that. That there are times when we're told the exact number of something for a reason. If there is a reason, there's 12 wells. There is a reason, there's 70 trees. So you just got to learn how to discern. Sometimes it may mean something. Sometimes it may not. But I've come to realize that sometimes it means something. So I was thinking about that. I said, why were the 12 wells numbered? Why were the 70 trees? And one thing I thought was, who counted the trees? Did Moses say, come here, Joshua, or get a ministry assistant? Come here, boy. Come here, Hezekiah. Come here, Jonah. Get out there and count them trees. So you get this 16-year-old ministry attendant or intern going out there, counting all these palm trees. And if he loses count, has to start all over again because a camel got in his way. And, So somebody counted 70 trees. It'd be easy to count 12 wells, that's not that much, but people walk around counting all the trees. There's something there when it says there were 70 trees. So I looked up a little bit, and 12 and 7 are mentioned, 70 are mentioned like one time before this. There were 70 descendants of Jacob that went to Egypt, and there were 12 sons of Jacob, and therefore there were 12 tribes of Israel. So like I said before, we're right at the very beginning of the history of Israel and the Jews and the Hebrews. So this is the first time, or like the second time these numbers are mentioned. So later on, I'll go through all the Bible, and there's many more times where there are 12 and 7. And the numbers are mentioned. And 12, it says, the meaning of 12, according to this source, which is considered a perfect number, is that it symbolizes God's power and authority, as well as serving as a perfect governmental foundation. And I was taking a lot of time to figure out, go through and count all the 12 places and what happened at each time 12 is mentioned, and come up with these theories. And different ones will have different ideas for what each number means, but you can debate that, argue that, but this is kind of a general consensus of what 12 means. And other ones have different ideas. And 70, 70 has a sacred meaning in the Bible that it makes up of the fact that the two perfect numbers, 7 representing perfection and 10 representing completeness in God's law. As such, it symbolizes perfect spiritual order carried out with all power. It can also represent a pure judgment. So there are instances of all these things in the Bible from there on. So again, just kind of take those teachings or statements about this number means this number means that with a grain of salt, but be open-minded to it. I've had to learn that because I was closed-minded for a long time. But God can open your eyes and reveal things to you through these. So just be open to that. So the 70, I don't know what that means there. But the 12 is easy to relate to because there were 12 tribes, 12 wells. So each one of them could have camped by their own well and had their own water supply. And God provided for them here in the desert. So while over there, verse 16, chapter 16, verse 1, and they journeyed from Elam, and all the congregations of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elam and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they departed from the land of Egypt. So it tells us right there, they were there about a month and a half. They went through all this, got to the oasis, and they had about a month and a half to rest before God started to lead them on from there.
What a lot of people don't think about this, but those 12 wells, you've got to remember there was well over 1 million people, so 12 divided into that many. They're going to have to be pretty good sized wells. They can't be just a little trickle or a little bitty spot. They're huge.
It takes a lot of water
It would.
for them and their camels and their livestock. So they were there, they got about a month and a half of rest. And then the Lord said, okay, it's time to move on. And we're going to see something happen that's already happened once before, and it's going to happen many times after this. The whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. You can underline that word complains. I like it to mark it because you're going to see it a lot from now on. Because it took them 3 days, just 3 days after seeing the Red Sea part and closed to start complaining. Now they've had rest for months and a half, plenty of water in this oasis in the desert. And they start to move, and what happens? First thing they do is complain. Now, isn't that just like them? Because we would never do that. I have never done that. And I'm moving because I've heard it's hard to hit a moving target. So you may want to back up in case there's a little rebound lightning because, I've done it. We've done it. We see God move in a huge, wonderful way. Part the sea. Next thing we do, we turn around and we're already complaining like nothing ever happened. God didn't do anything. We're saying, well, yeah, you did that, so what? And I got this problem, what you can do about it? Well, you know, he's going to handle it.
Right.
If we'll shut up and let him. Because they complained before. It was a problem that they came to this well at Marah, and the water was bitter. Now we complain about that. You know, I wouldn't be happy about that. I know a lot of us, drink bottled water. We've got a perfectly clean, safe source of water right there in our sink, but it didn't taste good. So we go to the grocery store and we buy this bottled water. I do it. Water where I live is safe, clean drink, won't hurt you. A lot of times it doesn't taste good.
Right.
So I got my jugs of water lined up right there on the counter, drinking my good, nice store-bought water. Now, I'm grateful for the water that comes out of this tap, but it tastes good. So I've got my little workaround, and I drink my nice water. And I'm grateful for both. A lot of people don't have a choice. They got to drink what they got. And there's places in the world they're literally drinking out of mud holes. They got two choices. Don't drink the water and die, or drink the water and die. It doesn't just taste bad. It'll kill them. And literally, so they have two choices. You roll the dice every time you drink that water. And we complain because it doesn't taste good. You know? But what did God do when the water was bitter? He told Moses what to do to make it sweet again, make it good again. So whatever problem there is going to come up, and God's going to have a solution already planned out. If we will get in tune with Him and listen to Him. And sometimes we do it in a complaining way, and He's gracious to listen to our complaints and work anyway. But we've got to get our attitude right. Because if we don't complain in the first place, God can work a lot quicker, and you see God move a lot better if we would trust and have faith in Him. So they complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. In verse 3, and the children of Israel said to them, "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." So, man, we had it good back there in Egypt. We had them big pots of food and meat. Man, we were getting stuffed. We were getting full every time we sat down to eat. We had meat, we had bread, we had going on. We were satisfied. When we got up from the table, had scraps and leftovers. We were full and more than enough. And you and Aaron, they brought us out here in this desert to make us starve to death. They just left the oasis, and they're already complaining. You know, they apparently brought food with them. Got maybe some at the oasis. Now it seems like it's running out. They're talking about hunger, dying of hunger. And it says, verse 2, it says the whole congregation. There were a few of them. It was the whole congregation. Everybody was complaining against Moses and Aaron. And they'll have something to say about that later on. So they were thinking back Egypt. They were so glad to get out of there, but now they want to go back already, a month and a half. And they're already wanting to go back because of security, because of the natural things. That's all they knew was how to be slaves. They still didn't know how to be free yet. And a lot of times, we're the same way. We've had this way of thinking, these attitudes, habits we've had for years and years and years. And even when we get free, something comes up, a trigger situation where we want to go right back to it because it's familiar. We know it. We're familiar with that. We've been through that. We know what that's like. It's not that we really want to a lot of times, but that's what we know. It's like, it's the saddest thing in the world. But on abused children, somebody had to take them from the home to protect them and take them to home. I was a summer missionary one time at a children's home in Round Rock. And you got all these kids there. One of them had strawberries by this time, but his face was all scarred up. And he still had trouble eating because his father had poured bad acid in his face, and it melted his face. And at first he couldn't open his mouth, couldn't open it up. But they had done surgeries to where he could talk and eat, but the scars were still there. But they still want to go back home.
Yeah.
Because that's mama, that's daddy, they're
Yeah.
free here. That's where they want to go. Even though they're in a safe place. They couldn't be anywhere safer than they were. If they want to go back, because that's familiar.
That's what they
And you understand, but you can't let them go back. Because of what they will probably go back into. So God's trying to deliver us from these things, but we can't go back. When he gets us free, stay free. Don't go back. We can't go back to Egypt. We can't go back to what it was just because it's familiar. And sometimes there may be something, some way better in that situation than we are now. But now you're free. You want better than that. And not just free, but now we're out here in the desert. Who we can rely on? You know, there's nothing that we can do to make ourselves, provide for ourselves in the desert. God provided the oasis for them. He can provide for us in the desert. But we have to follow his lead and where he's guiding us to, because he knew where to bring them to this oasis of the land. He knew exactly the exact route from the Red Sea to this place. They wouldn't be able to find it on their own. They brought them to that place. Let them rest. And now he's bringing them out again. Because he has a plan. And if he calls us to leave an oasis of rest and provision to go out into what looks like us to a barren desert, he still has a plan. He still knows how to lead us across that desert. If he got us out of Egypt, across the sea, to the oasis, then there's a next step. Step by step by step. Oasis to oasis to oasis. Until we get to, in their case, they're going to the promised land. But there's this process, step by step by step, that to go through. And then to follow God each step of the way to get to where the Lord has for them. And we're the same way. Only a lot of times we kind of step over here, and we step over here, and we step over here, and then we kind of go back again where we started from and cross it. Now we got this stepping over here. And that's okay. At one point, at some point, when we get way over here, we're going to say, wait a minute. I was doing pretty good when I was trusting on God to lead me. But when I started going my way, it's not always easy and smooth when we're following God's way, but when we do it our way, but it can get rough real quick, and for a long time.
Amen.
When we finally get to that point where we cry out to God and surrender, it's because we have to let go and let go of control. God, it's yours. I'm messed up. I'm out here. What am I going to do? I can't do anything without you. When we get to that point, God will lead us back. And one thing I figured out about that, you know, these detours we take, when you come to a detour on a highway, it's usually because the road's under construction. There's some problem ahead, usually because they're working on trying to improve it, fix it or improve it. So with the sign saying detour, and most of the detours are rough, are rougher than the highway that you just pull off on, and
Yep.
you know, you're having to kind of bounce down through there. Who knows where? Sometimes they can be long. But a lot of times they just work on a section at a time. You can sometimes see the other end of where they're working on it. But sometimes it goes around the hill. And if we're making our detour, we can go the long way. We can take the long way off the road. But I went on a mission trip one time when I was in college in Minnesota. And somehow or another, we moved into Arkansas somewhere. We took a turn off the road. What even a detour, I don't think. Just some reason we turned here. And 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, we started looking around and saying, where are we? We had nowhere idea where we were or how to get back to where we needed to be. So we were there, and all of a sudden, one of us remembered we just stopped at a restaurant to eat. We didn't pray over the food. We stopped right there. We blessed our food. 5 minutes later, we were back on the highway. We cried out to God, forgive us for not blessing our food. And that's still a little story, but it had the same lesson. It can be real. We do the same thing. We cry out to God and say, I messed up. I've got myself over here. I can't get myself out. I know where I am. I know where I need to be, where I'm going, but I can't get from here to there unless you show me. And God will hear our prayer and will lead us back. And the thing about a detour, I figured out several years ago, is they're not circular. They don't take you back around and bring you back on the highway in the same place that you turned off. Even though you went on a detour, when you come back to the highway, you're still further along than you were when you left the highway. It was a bumpy ride. It was a hard road to hoe. But because we didn't give up on God, we may have kind of turned away. But just like the people you were talking about, there's still something working in them. That when they see you, it reminds them, it brings it up in them. It's still in there. So when we get back on that highway, it's not a loss. Those years and that time, those things we went through, they weren't a loss. There were some tough, hard lessons. But they weren't lost days, weeks, months, years. We may have lost some things, but we still have the Lord. We still have Him. He still brought us back. And if He brought us through those things, what else would He bring us through? And if He will have the grace and the mercy to bring us back to the highway further down than when we left. I mean, you can't hardly get a better picture of His grace and His mercy. You went through all this. You turned your back on me. You went your own way for all this time. When He brought us back on the highways further along, when the Father saw the prodigal son, He didn't sit up on that porch. There He is. That sorry, no good thing. Finally came to the house. I knew He would one of these days. He'd get tired. He'd get broke. He'd get out there, find out his friends weren't really friends. He'd get out there and hit rock bottom, feed the pigs, want to eat what they're eating. Yeah. I knew He'd figure it out one of these days. He'd come crawling back to me. Yeah. That crossed his mind for about half a second. And then there he went. He went running down the road to meet that boy at the gate.
Yes.
He was there to meet him when he walked through that gate. And he didn't speak, well, good to see you, son. How you doing? He hugged him up. He didn't let go of him for a long time. He kept his arm around him. He walked him up there to the house and said, get the best clothes in the house and put them on him right now. You get out there and you kill a calf. We'll fix a party there. My son has come home.
Yeah.
They celebrated the son coming back. You know, the boy would have said, if I could just be a servant, a slave, if I can just get back to my daddy's house, I'll do anything. I'll just be the lowest of the low as long as I'm back on my daddy's place. And that's not what his father had in mind. That's not what God has in mind for us, each one of us. Even though we've been prodigal, when we come back, there's a robe, there's a ring, there's a fat calf. Because that's how God sees us. There may be a detour, but when we get where we're going, it's going to be good. Egypt, or Israel at this point, hadn't figured that out. They're still complaining about things that don't go their way, just like that. They don't fall in place. First thing, I knew it. I knew it was going to happen. I need we get out of here, run out of food, and then what we're going to do? Moses, Aaron, come on, boys, do something. We're hungry. We're hungry. What are you going to feed us? And Aaron and Moses are sitting there saying, well, I don't know. You know, it's like how Jesus, when the disciple asked him, have you all these food people here, what are we going to do? He said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he said, oh, look at me. I can't do anything about it. Moses and Aaron were in the same position, but they had a difference. Moses and Aaron, by this point, had learned faith and to believe and trust God. So later on in the chapter, we won't get to it tonight, but they tell them, why are you looking at us? Why are you complaining about us? We're not the ones that got you here. Look to the one that did. If you want to complain to him. But complaining's not going to do any good. Complaining's not going to solve your problem. Moses and Aaron, by this point, had learned faith. And so they got the pressure of all these people demanding something from them that they knew they couldn't do. So how are they going to get that done? It's by faith. By faith and believing. Because they had learned and they had seen. And Moses had a burning bush experience. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of the whole Bible. And he said, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. We sang it tonight. You're standing on holy ground. Because it was just, it couldn't have been any dirtier dirt. I mean, you were on the backside of the desert. Dry, dead, dust, dirt. But it was made holy by the presence of God. So we're standing right now on holy ground because the presence of the Lord is here. That's why I said, what numbers? They'll come. They'll come. But this is holy ground tonight because the presence of the Lord is here. And we symbolically take off our shoes just to honor and respect him. So we do that spiritually. And there's no limit to what God can do. I mean, Moses left that burning bush experience, went down to this country where there was a death sentence on him. Had been. And he went back down there and he left. He went down there and just stole Israel out from underneath their noses. I mean, went down there, one man, or two men, Aaron was his mouthpiece, and went down there and they just took away all these people without fire and shot. Walked in there and let them out because God was with him. If God is with us, who can be against us?
Right.
If God is for us, who can be against us? We have the power of God manifesting in us. This little church out here in the country on the side of the road, God is with us.
Amen.
This is holy ground. And we're going to see things happen because if God is for us, who can be against us?
Amen.
There ain't nothing that can hold this place back. Because God's going to manifest his glory in this place. And there are going to be a lot of shoes come off. Whether they really do or not, whether you see it or not, they're going to do it. And we will see the fruit. It's like that seeds. We're going to see those things come forth because they've already been planted. And there's nothing that can stop it. As long as we stay and we follow step by step God through this unknown territory. Because we don't know what's coming. And who would have thought the last year and a half?
Right.
I mean, nobody saw that coming. But God did. And he knows, so if he thought the last year and a half, the next year and a half, he's already mapped out.
Right.
We just have to stay on the highway. No detours allowed. We stay on the highway, we're going to get to where God is leading us.
Amen.
Amen.